Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Everquest Old School. Now, on this episode, we're going to be doing something a little different from what I normally do. This will be a bonus episode for those of you who may not want to watch this one, because I will be covering loss and memories and things of that sort. It's not really going to have anything to do with Everquest, although we will be fighting and things of that sort in the background. But this will be a bonus episode. You'll still have the 7 o'clock episode, like always, that has us, or maybe it's just me. I don't remember what's on the docket today because I'm about 3 months ahead of schedule on that. But this episode is going to be a tribute to my brother, who is going to be his birthday on Monday, or would have been his birthday on Monday had he not passed away 2 years ago. And, you know, the reason I want to talk about him, one, is because, you know, he's always in my memories. He's always in my mind because he has and always will be, you know, a big part of what I am and who I am. And the reason I do the channel is greatly in large due to him, because it was something we were going to do together, and he got me started in EverQuest to begin with. He got me started in computer games in general to begin with. So because of him, you guys are able to watch these videos, and some of you say that you like him quite a bit. So, you know, you kind of owe that to him. I owe it to him, and because of that, you know, like I said, I just want to do a tribute episode and just kind of talk a little bit about, you know, who he was and what he did to kind of get me started on my journey through video games and things of that sort. I do apologize, though, if my voice breaks up. You know, it has been 2 years, but, you know, time doesn't always make it easier to talk about. So, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get into it. Now, my journey on video games pretty much started as soon as I can remember. I know my other brothers were into, we had gotten a Nintendo and we were playing that. Before that, it was arcade games when I could afford it, because, you know, a quarter back then, yeah, that may not sound like a lot nowadays when video games are costing $5, $6, $7 to play some of the more advanced ones in the arcade. You know, it was a quarter a piece, and, you know, you didn't always get a lot of money back then. So we made do with what we had. But yeah, I always played video games as far as I can remember. But as far as computer games, my very first memory of that is playing on my brother's computer. And it really started, I think, when I was like 6 or 7. So he didn't live with us at the beginning part of my life. He had his own house. He was in a different city. And it wasn't until things started to go a little south. We had a drive-in that we owned. And drive-ins, unfortunately, guys, went the way of the dodo. They didn't really survive. And if you didn't put money away for a rainy day like we didn't, then when it actually happened, we lost pretty much everything. We had to start all over again. And we moved around a lot. I didn't even realize what was going on, to be honest, when I was a kid. I was just being a kid. They sheltered me. They kind of shielded me from all of that financial stuff, and we were just who we were. And I was happy with the family that I had. But to help out, I guess they had asked him to come back and, you know, help, you know, with the bills and things of that sort. So, you know, being part of the family, he dropped what he was doing and said, yeah, I'll come back and help out as much as I can. And that's the very first time that I've actually got to remember seeing him for a long period of time. I mean, he had visited a little bit here and there, but other than that, I don't really remember spending any time with him beyond that. And when he came back, he brought all his stuff with him. And one of the things he had brought with him was a computer. And that was the very first time that I had ever seen a computer. This back in the day before they had them in every school. You could see them in the stores occasionally, but to be honest, they didn't really have a lot of them in the stores. They're usually well protected by, you know, a salesman who was trying to sell you something. So it was kind of cool to be able to sit down with it and actually get to mess around with the computer with somebody who didn't mind, of course, you messing around on it, and two, who actually knew how to use it. So it wasn't just like, oh, I click a couple of buttons, it loads up a screen, I don't know how to use that program, and then I'm done with it, right? He had some games on there. Of course, they were text-based games, but games just the same. And I found them to be absolutely fascinating. And I would sit there and play those games and type in weird responses just to see like what the programmers had, you know, programmed into that if somebody actually typed that response, you know. And a lot of the time it would come back with the default answer and be like, nope, try something else, or that's not programmed, or something like that. But occasionally they'd be like, you know, you have a dirty mouth, or something like that, you know. And it would just crack me up. Of course, I'm being really young at the time, but you know, I really enjoyed those games. And like I said, he was the first person to really introduce me to the computer in general. And now I really can't, you know, I can't see where my life would be without computers in them, because I use them literally on a daily basis, not just to play video games, but to do my writing and things of that sort. So they really have just taken over everybody's life in a lot of ways. But yeah, so I got very familiar with computers because of him. But then later on, my very first job that I actually got was working at a movie theater. We kind of still stayed into the movie business even after we had lost our own movie theater with like the Cineplexes, and then later on with like the multiplexes and things of that sort. But he was working as a manager at one, and I got a job there, and I eventually became a supervisor. So I worked with him for several years while I was in high school until I finally finished and went off to study to be what I was eventually going to become, which was a writer. And it was like when I looked at it, it was kind of sucky because you're working with your older brother, and they're there the whole time, and you're a teenager, you want your space. But when I look back on it, I actually realized just how lucky I was to be able to do that, because a lot of my advancement was due probably because he was there, because he put in good words for me. He knew what I was capable of doing. I didn't get the crap. No, I take that back. I did get crap work. I did get crap work. I did my fair share of it, taking out the garbage and things of that sort, cleaning up the movie theater. But, overall, I think it was a little bit easier. And at least I didn't have to worry about dealing with a sucky boss. Everybody knows as you get older and has had several jobs just how much of a pain in the butt it is to have a boss you just don't get along with. There may not actually be nothing wrong with that boss. Your just personalities kind of clash. At least I never had that problem there. I've had that problem in other jobs, and it really is a nightmare when that happens. But it was actually pretty interesting to work with them there. And so I had that, and while we were working there, one of the other managers, the assistant managers, actually bought him a game for his birthday, and it was this one right here. This is EverQuest, the original game, and he brought it home. And of course, I was still living there at the time because I was a teenager and stuff. And I was blown away by the game. I was just absolutely infatuated with it. I loved it. It was right up my alley, RPG all the way, and I loved RPGs at the time. There was very few of them out on the market because of, I guess just there wasn't a lot of interest in it. It was kind of difficult to make. There was a lot of depth in it, and if you didn't put a lot of work into your RPG, it wasn't loved by the community, and people would kind of bash it. And it was just a lot easier to make like a platformer where you just jump from one thing to another, and there's really no storyline involved. And now that I'm putting those down, I'm just saying, like, overall, I think it's a little bit easier to make those, at least back then, than it was to make something like this. And so, I fell in love with it. So did he. And we played it for years and years. And then, once we kind of, it seemed like almost on cue, the both of us and the other brothers that I had would play this game as well. We seemed all to kind of hit that wall at the same time and be like, there's a new game coming out. What, you want to try that one? And, it was like World of Warcraft and Aeon and, Dungeons and Dragons and all those other ones. We would try them, and some of them were pretty good. I think EverQuest 2 kind of took up the majority of our time. That one we actually kind of got addicted to because, again, it was like a sequel to this one, and you kind of move some of your feelings over to that one, and therefore it kind of captures your attention a little bit more than any of the other ones really did for us. But I know pretty much people who have gotten into the gaming field where they play an MMO and they play like World of Warcraft to start with. Like, they love that one just as much as we love this one because it was their first. And I think that's the same in life as well. When you're talking about, people you love, it seems like the first one is always a little bit more memorable for most of us than, I'm not going to say than all of them, but, definitely hits you and you kind of remember it a little bit more. And I think it's the same thing in video games. When you find that one video game, and it sounds weird to talk about it that way, but, it kind of is that case where you do develop feelings for it in some weird way because it does touch your life. And this one definitely touched both of our lives in a very deep way. And we made a lot of good friends out of it. We spent a lot of time playing it. And overall, it was just a blast to experience with them. And over the years, I have to kind of backtrack a little bit too, because, he kind of got me into my writing career as well, in a sense that he always loved books, and there was always a bunch of books around. In fact, those of you who may have watched the episode I released for Chupa just a few days ago that showed off my new gaming room that's not even completely close to being done yet. It's still dusty, and there's a lot of shelves that need to be fixed and finished and refined, and just, it's very, very unfinished. But, I have all his books in there, and also have all of his Legos that he loved from the moment he was born. Like, he was just big into the Legos. It was one of those things that, as he got older, he got into the bigger and bigger ones, like the Death Star and the Star Destroyer and things of that sort. So very, very complex ones. And he would always complain about the instructions on how they sucked. And later in life, they clearly were not written or designed by people. And they were like a computer that had scanned the construction that somebody had come up with, and then like reversed engineered it, and they didn't make any sense when you actually tried to build it. So at least that was his opinion of it. I never really built any Legos myself, never really too much into those. But there was one day though that I remember when I was like 15 or 16, the power went out. And it was storming outside, and they were doing some construction nearby. The neighborhood where I live had started to kind of balloon, and started getting a lot more houses. There was really only a handful of houses here when we first moved into this house that was built for us. And then after that, like I said, it just kind of exploded, and all of a sudden there were several hundred houses being built at the same time. So power outages, well, for whatever reason they were doing stuff, seemed to happen quite a bit back then. And one day it was raining, and the power went out, and we didn't have anything to do. Like computers run off of electricity. Well, laptops were not really feasible back then, so we were using desktops. We didn't all have cell phones. Cell phones weren't even a thing yet. We were still using the regular... Well, actually, there were cell phones, but there were the bricks that didn't have any games or any apps on them. They literally made a phone call, and they cost a fortune to use, and really not the greatest thing in the world. So there was no technology. Like I didn't have any power, and so none of the technology that we had, which is basically the TV, worked. And you're just kind of sitting there waiting for the rain to stop so you could go outside and play or do something. And in the meantime, I kind of went to one of my brothers and I was like, hey, I am bored, right? Do you have a book or something I can read? And they gave me a series of books to read. And I went through them. I was a very, very slow reader at the time. I wasn't really big into reading myself. And he had given me a book that my older brother had given him. And I started reading it. And I was like, it's a pretty good storyline. But after I got done with the first book, and it was still raining the next day still. I mean, it had been raining for a few days after that as well. But I got done with the first book, and I went back to him, and I was like, it's an interesting storyline. Where you got the next one? And I started reading the next one, and, I started talking to him about it, and I was like, the story, kind of sucks when it went in this direction. It should have went this direction. And, he kind of challenged me. He was like, if you think you could do better, then write your own book, right? Because it was one of his favorite books, so he kind of got a little insulted by it. And I was like, fine, I'll do it then, right? I'll write my own book, And I was like, I was going to be, defiant to the end, right? I was going to write my own book. So I sat down and with a piece of paper, still raining outside, nothing else better to do. And I started writing my own book. And that eventually became the very first book that I got published because he had challenged me to write something better than the book he had given me. And the only reason he had that book, the only reason he had started reading all of those series is because of my oldest brother had given him that series and said, hey, you might like this one. And eventually, like I said, he did quite a bit. So, yeah, in essence, I own that as well. Like I said, I mean, anybody in your life is going to mold and shape your life in ways you don't even realize even why they're there. It's only after the fact, for me anyways, that I actually, sat down and started looking at what was going on and, what led me down one path versus another path, and how my life has been shaped and changed by the people around me. And of course, I'm going to say, quite a bit, guys. Of course, can we do it again? No. But yeah, it's, that was one of my brothers giving me a book that had been given to him by another brother. So it was two of them that helped shape that. It wasn't just a one-person deal. But without one of them there, the other one wouldn't have had what he needed, and vice versa. So, they both, everybody in my family has gone to shape my life in ways that have been interesting. But because we're talking about my oldest brother who had passed, I kind of wanted to bring that up. Because, like I said, ooh, that's a princess. I don't know if I can take her. I might be able to. I'm at 48%. We'll try it. But, yeah, it was interesting because he was also into writing as well. And he had never really finished any of his books. I find that to be the hardest thing when writing, guys. If you're ever interested in that field, finishing the book is very difficult because it's long process. It's not just sit down and write the book, which it definitely is. That's a hard process in its own right. But it's also going back and rewriting. You got to go back and edit it. And when you go back to edit it, you're probably not going to like what you read as much as you did when you first put it down. So you're going to, fix it a little bit. You're going to expand on the subject. A lot of the time when I first wrote an entire chapter, it would be very sparse of description. It would just be the overall story of where the characters were going and what they were doing. Not a lot of dialogue, and what dialogue there was very, very short and concise. And then when I went back, I would add flair to it. I'd add, actual emotion in the dialogue. I would add scenery and descriptions of where they were going. Then you would go back again and reread it. And of course, you don't really want to do this all at the same time, because you go back and reread it. Eventually, it just becomes a blur in your head, and you don't know what you're talking about anymore, or what you're even writing about anymore. But you go back and reread it a third time, and you're like, I put too much description, or I still didn't put enough description in this part, and I put too much over here. And that's when you start refining it even more. And you can do this. I think I went back and read my book so many times that I could probably read it to you word for word without even having it in my hand, and yet at the same time, I'm still not completely happy with it. I could probably go back and rewrite the entire thing all over again to this day, because as you write more and more, you become better at it. And my brother, to be honest, was far, far better at writing than I will ever be, and he never published a book. So it was his skill that I would kind of go back to when I had questions, when I was stuck with a chapter, and I was like, I don't know what I need to do to spice this up, or how do I say what I'm trying to say in a way that everybody can understand it. I would go back for those things and talk to him and be like, oh, he's like, you can use this word, right? I'm like, I've never even heard of that word. It's because he read so much. He was exposed to a lot more vocabulary than most of us will ever be. And like I said, I owe that to him to have that crutch that I could go to and talk to him about it and be like, yeah, what do I use on this one? What's that word I'm thinking of that I can't just quite picture in my head? And again, nowadays you have like the internet to do that, but we didn't really have that capability back then. And plus, the internet's not perfect. You go on there and start typing in like Google or something like that of what's the word I'm thinking of. They're going to be like, the internet's going to be like, error. I have no idea what you're talking about. Here's a bunch of like porn results or something. It's like the default that it always comes back with. So I don't know. It just, it's very useful, very helpful to have somebody you can lean on like that. And my brother was always there for me. So yeah, it was nice. I'm always trying to be there for my friends and my family as well. He wasn't perfect. We're brothers. Brothers fight. Brothers have arguments, and I definitely had my share with him, just like I have with all my brothers. But overall, I would say it was a good relationship. We had a lot of fun together, and we played this game quite a bit at the same time. But very rarely did we actually get to play together, and I don't know what the reason behind that was. I think what it was is we had two very different play styles. For those of you who watch my videos, you will know I tend to, very much favor groups. I really don't like fighting on my own. It's just not that I don't like the experience. It's just I don't find it as enjoyable as having friends around to group with. Whereas my brother, he very much enjoyed the solo aspect of the game. In fact, that's pretty much how he played the entire game all the way up to max level, is he soloed almost the entire time. I won't say he soloed the whole time, because there was a few times I was able to talk him into joining a group to get a piece of whatever he needed to get. And, he somewhat liked it. He found it a little hectic because it's something he had never done before. It's like somebody who's never soloed before going out there and trying to do it. They would find it quite hectic as well. So in reverse, it was just a little bit too much for him at the beginning. But eventually he got used to it. It just, even once he got used to it, it still wasn't his thing. So I can't really blame him for that. You got to play the game how you enjoy it. But because he didn't quite play in groups, we just never really grouped together. And of course, he was a druid and I was a cleric. So, two healers, especially when you already have like a pure healer, doesn't really happen too often. They usually like to have like more DPS or something. And yeah, the druid could be DPS in a sense. But back then, the groups were very, very hard to get. There's a lot of players, guys. A lot of people on. It's not like it is now where you go into a zone. Yeah, there may be 2 or 3 groups there. Sometimes there's 5 or 6 groups, and all the spots are taken. No, this was back in the day when every spot was taken. There is 60, sometimes more people sitting at the entrance waiting on a list to get into those spots in the group. And the groups weren't as big in the areas that they had to pull from as they are now. It was more like you had this one very specific room with 3 mobs in it. The hallway group, which was a group outside in the hallway, not camping any names, was pulling just like the 3 or 4 mobs in the hallway. And then, of course, you had another group a little bit further away from them that was camping another room. Maybe mobs that had names in it, maybe not. and then so on and so forth. So every spot, sometimes even places. There we go, level 4 guys. But yeah, sometimes places in the zone that only had one spawn would have, a person or a couple people sitting there camping that one spot. So it was very much overcamped. And when it came to getting in groups, people had their choice. They had, like I said, 60, 70 people sitting at the entrance waiting to get in on the list. And if they wanted DPS, they're like, what do we want for DPS? Do we want a necro? Do we want a rogue? They had their choice. And so if you had a druid who wanted in the group, they were like, well, where does that fit in? Do we really need a druid? Or would we kill even faster with a necro? And people were like, oh yeah, we'd kill even faster with a necro. And if we're killing faster, maybe we can snag some of the mobs from like halfway across the zone if we're in the right spot and nobody's pulling them. So yeah, people always wanted to get that perfect group just in case. And druids, unfortunately, never really fit in. So I never really got to group with them all that much. I did try to make the time to go over there with my Shadow Knight and group with him as well. But like I said, he preferred to solo. And when you're soloing as a druid, you kite it. You run it around with the snare on and you dot it, or you root dot it. You root kill it. He didn't really do that too much. He actually preferred to do like 3 or 4 mobs at the same time, especially once he had like clarity or KEI. KEI was just amazing for him. Every single time it would wear out, he'd go back over to the plane of knowledge and get more of it and stuff like that. But it was just, it was a different play style. And so we just, we only grouped, I think, a handful of times that I'm thinking about it in my mind right now. Although every night before we logged off, he would send me a message if he had died that day and be like, any chance you can give me a res? And I'd be like, yeah, teleport me over there. We'll run over there and I'll res you with my cleric as many times as you needed to. So he would just save the corpses, so he had that little crutch as well. So if he had a bad day, and sometimes he had some really bad days, people training and going through the zone that they normally don't go through, or roots breaking when it's not supposed to, or times that it normally doesn't. Because you'll see it when you're on this game, guys. The one day is completely different from the other, and some days it seems like root works just fine, and then the next day, every single time you cast that spell, it breaks, and then breaks again. And you have no idea what you're doing differently, and you're not doing anything differently. It's just, it's random. It's completely random, and you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. So there'd be days where he'd be like, yeah, I got 12 corpses. And I'm like, holy crap. He's like, yeah, I lost a level. But then he'd get the level back and everything would be okay. I don't know if this guy attacks me when I'm attacking one of these creatures. I know somebody does out there. I don't think it's anybody in here, though. I think it's Holly Windstalker. Yeah, that might be it. But, he also played over here. Like, this was one of his favorite zones, is Qeynos. Although we always called it Qeynos back then. There's always that debate on how you're supposed to pronounce it. I think the game developers pronounce it Qeynos. Does that make it right? Well, if they made the word, then I guess so. But back then, we, like I said, didn't have internet. We didn't have YouTube. And so we had to figure out how you pronounce that on your own. And I've never heard the Q pronounced with a K, or at least if you do, you don't hear it that often. So I always just thought it was Qeynos and not Qeynos. But tomato, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, he loved this area quite a bit. He loved coming over here and killing stuff. And he played a druid, so he kind of took that same mentality I hear a lot of druids do. And they wouldn't kill animals that were non-aggro to them. So they have this spell that actually lets them charm animals, I believe. And he wouldn't use it unless the animal was already ready to attack. And I always thought that had something to do with that Holly Windstalker out there, because I think she actually will attack you if you're attacking animals, certain ones, when she sees you. And, that kind of gets ingrained into you at the very beginning. I thought that was one of the greatest things about this game, is it kind of sucks you in that way and gets you to role play. But, later on, once we got done with this one, like I said, we moved over to Everquest 2, the both of us, and we started playing over there. And over there, we actually did start grouping together a lot more. I played a Guardian, and he went back to his roots, and he started playing a Druid. So I was like, okay, yeah, we can group together really well, right? I mean, maybe not the best combo in the world, but I mean, Druids are pretty much like the utility class of being, I would hate to say average because it sounds like an insult, but it's not in the context that I'm using it, because they have a little bit of everything. They got the root, they got the healing, they got DPS, they got ports, speeds, buffs, all this stuff, But they don't have anything that's fantastic. They still have it all. So it was kind of a nice combination, just not like the most uber one that you can possibly put together with a with a tank. But so we grouped together like that, and at the time I wasn't living there with him anymore, but we were still able to hang out and we talked, and it kind of became like a tradition or a habit where we would hang out and talk almost every day. And we pretty much did that all the way up until the point when he passed, and that leaves a pretty big hole in your life when you have. And I didn't even realize it at the time that he was actually my best friend. Like I just so happened to be lucky enough to have a brother who ended up being my best friend. So yeah, that was pretty rough, and it happened pretty quickly. I'm not gonna go into the whole, like what happened and all that other stuff. I've done that in other episodes, and that stuff kind of gets, it's just kind of rough to talk about. But it happened kind of suddenly. We weren't expecting it. He had gone in for one of his doctor visits that day, and on the way to be driven there by my father, he passed out in the seat and never woke back up again. So that was it. I got the call that day and found out, and I remember having to go over to his house and look through his stuff, and of course he has all the Legos and the books and all that other stuff there, and like it's just stuff. I mean, that's all any of us really ever have is just stuff, but it's stuff that I remember even from being a kid. Like, he kept all of the Legos that he ever had. And so, because they meant something to him. They were something, like some people like sports equipment or sports stuff, they have all that all over their house. Some people have, stuffed animals or, whatever it is. Everybody has it's just one little thing maybe. And maybe you don't even see it that much when you go over to a person's house, but they got something, everybody seems to have something that they're interested in. And his was Legos. Although his passion of reading definitely became a thing as well. And so he'd have all these books. Although he never really collected them in the sense that, I need to take care of these. He just always had one on him. Whether he was going for a drive, he always had like 2 or 3 books in the car. Anytime you got into the car, you always had to move a couple off the seat. Because if he was going somewhere, he had to wait for whatever reason, he'd just pull out a book and start reading it. And, he'd treat him rough sometimes, and sometimes he wouldn't. He had some first editions and things of that sort. But, going over there and seeing all the books and stuff, and then, later finding out that nobody really had any space. Everybody in my family pretty much has kids, and they just didn't really have any space for any of the stuff. So they were just going to be like, yeah, we'll just give it all away. And I'm like, if nobody minds, because he didn't leave a will or anything like that. He literally left his computer on that day. He was watching, what was the animated movie? It was Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs 2, I think is what it was. And he had that one up on his computer. He was watching it. He actually paused it halfway through, or maybe 3/4 of the way through, and had a drink right there on the desk, and bag of chips, those veggie chips on the side, and every intention to come back and finish the movie and finish his drink and continue on with his life, and never really got to. So he never really he didn't plan for it. Didn't really occur to him that it could be something that happened, and just kind of woke me up to the fact that you don't ever really know how much time you really got. And so when he when nobody really wanted the stuff, I was like, I'll take it. I'll put it up in my entertainment room, which is what I'm building right now, and you guys will see those videos of it as I progress further and further through it. But all the Legos that are in there are his. He built every single one of them, and it was a lot. I had no idea how many he had until I started trying to find space for the books. And the bookshelves, I actually had to custom make them, and I'm not a carpenter. I'm okay with being handy occasionally. I can do my fair share, but I don't do the refining part of it. It's not gonna look beautiful. So I got a lot of like flaws and things that it just it doesn't look as good as it could be. Although there are ways for me to cover that stuff up, and this is exactly what I'm gonna be doing, is just covering up the flaws of my shoddy construction work on it. But I built these shelves, and at first it was just 1 layer thick of books, and then later on I realized there's like another 80 boxes of books. I can't do 1 layer thick on all these, so it's going to have to be 2 layer thick of books. So the layer behind it, you won't be able to see them. And I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. You can kind of pull out 1 layer and check to see what's behind it and stuff if you want to read a book in there. And at least I can get them all up on the shelf, and they're all preserved and everything like that. Then towards the end of it, where I only had 1 wall left, I was like, 2 layers isn't going to work. I need 3 layers, and there's big books in there. So these shelves are going to be huge. And then, of course, he has all these Legos like the Death Star and the Star Destroyer and the X-Wing, and these are really big ones. I'm talking about like the size of 2, maybe 3 basketballs for the medium-sized ones, and then like the Death Stars, those, it's huge, it's massive. And of course, he has like bus-sized ones of like Yoda and Darth Maul and things of that sort. Not all Star Wars, but a lot of them are Star Wars. I think that's just because those were made in really big sizes, and he just liked the complex ones, no matter what type of Lego it was. Because he has, the regular ones too, like the pirate ones and all sorts of different like airplanes and things of that sort that kind of wind up on their own and actually spin the propeller and stuff. Like I said, the more complex, the better. And it kind of ballooned into this thing for me. Like some people get like shot glasses as gifts. When somebody finds out, hey, this guy likes shot glasses, I can get those in different parts of the world. Everybody seems to have one there. Once they found out that he liked Legos, it was like, yeah, that's what he was going to get from then on, and that's exactly what happened. So it was interesting to go through all of them. But the books, man, the books were so many boxes. I remember actually getting them the very first time and trying to pack them all the way in boxes. It took an entire U-Haul, just for the books. And I was just blown away. Once you take them out of the boxes and put them on the shelves, they actually seem to take up less space for whatever reason. I know it's not magical, it's not actually happening that way, but they definitely do seem to take up less space when they're on the shelf. And, it's just, it's a long process. I've been doing it for about 2 years now, trying to build this room in my spare time. And I'm pretty close to being where the shelves are up. Yeah, like they're not painted. They're going to be laminated with that cheap lamination crap you can get in the hardware store to cut, like I said, to cover up the flaws in the corners and the fact that it's like bad, cheapy wood that I'm using because I'm not rich. But it's interesting to do it, and I think it's coming out pretty good. And I think the room eventually, at one point down the road, maybe another 2 years, maybe more, who knows, it will be finished and it will be looking pretty good. But like I said, it's the things that you have to go over there and you have to do when somebody passes that I think was the roughest part. It's just kind of sitting there in the room and looking at everything that he owned and being like, this was his life. This was the stuff he had. And yeah, it's like somebody has to do that for me one day. Or maybe they don't have to, but I got enough family here. If I don't outlive them, then somebody probably will do that for me and kind of come over here and look at all the stuff and be like, wow, look at all the computers and the microphones and the speakers and all the video games that he has, because I've kind of decided to do the entertainment room half and half. So one side is his, where I'll be doing all the VR stuff, and the other half will be the side that I do the other stuff on, where I sit on the couch and play the video games with you guys. And that side's going to have all the video games that I have collected over my entire life on that side. So yeah, they're both going to be like entertainment sides of the same thing, just a different kind of look to them. And then of course I have the rest of the house, which has all my other junk in it. But yeah, it's just kind of gets to you when you have to do that. And to be honest, he was the very first person that I was close to that I ever lost. I was very fortunate to go through so much of my life without ever losing anybody I cared about, or anybody that I ever really knew. Like I had lost uncles and things of that sort when I was younger, but I had never even met them before. And it sounds kind of horrible to say that, if you don't know the person, you really don't feel that loss for them, but it's true. I mean, it is. I mean, it's just one of those things where the longer you spend with somebody, the more you care about them, the harder it is to lose them. And, losing a brother that you had spent your entire life with, or at least most of the life that you could remember with, is it leaves a big hole. And me and him actually used to watch movies all the time. I kid you not, guys. I used to watch maybe 6 to 12 new movies a week. And thanks to him, he would get the movies and I would get some movies, and we would, I remember as a kid, he would go to Blockbuster, I should say, guys. And he would pick out 3 movies on VHS tape. Yes, we are that old. And he would pick out the movies, and he always picked out horror movies. And after a while, the horror movies stopped becoming like AAA and started becoming like B movies, and then way beyond B movies, and then just really, really horrible movies. But he would get the horror movies that I had no interest in watching, to be honest. There was only one I ever wanted to watch, was It, and I was too young at the time to watch it. They wouldn't let me watch it, so I had to watch it years later. But it was he would let me pick out one, or he let me and my brothers pick out one for the fourth one that we would get that weekend. it kind of just ballooned in from there. And of course, being around the movie theaters all the time, we got to see sneak peeks of all the new movies under the guise of we have to make sure that it was built properly. Because for those of you who don't know, what I mean by built, they come in reels, and the reels, they weigh about 25 pounds. A little thing. It's a steel crate that it comes in that you have a little handle on top, and it's shaped kind of like a stop sign, and the film is actually in there. And depending on the length of the movie, you may have 4 of those reels. You may have more of them. Usually only around 4. Sometimes less though. But you'd have to splice them together, and that basically means you're just gluing them together with tape and things of that sort. Clear, of course, and you got to make sure you put it together the right way. So you'd screen it that night before it came out, or sometimes you get it a couple of nights beforehand. If it comes out on Friday, you may get it on Wednesday or even Tuesday, and so you could put it together that night, that day, and then screen it Tuesday night when everybody goes home real late at night. 12, 1, 2 in the morning. You're screening it, and you would be sitting there with whoever wanted to be there with you. Like the employees would sometimes stay if it was a really big budget movie coming out, and everybody's like, oh, I'm really super excited to see that. Sometimes you'd invite family up. They're not really supposed to, but they're there just the same. And I guess as long as people weren't going out and like recording it and putting it out there for people to see, that was probably pretty okay. But we were doing this long before even that had been somewhat of a thought in somebody's brain, and the internet didn't really exist, to be honest, to do that kind of state. It would take you, like a year and a half to upload that kind of file size, and it would be horrible quality, and it would take somebody else like a year and a half to download that file size. So the speed wasn't there. It wasn't, unless you lived on like a military top secret base or something like that, that was not going to happen. So yeah, we would go up there and screen the movies and see like every movie that was coming out. Of course, they still had those movie theater wars that were going on at the time, which is like Cineplex Odeon versus General Cinema kind of thing, where one theater would get one movie that was a blockbuster and the other guys would get the other movie that was a blockbuster. And I remember at one time, the movies that were coming out were the exact same movie, just done by 2 different film companies. So you had something like Deep Impact, and then you had something like Armageddon. It was almost the exact same story, and in fact, a lot of the time I heard that it was the exact same script that the 2 movie theaters had read. They liked both of them. Both companies liked the script. When they found out the other guys were doing it, they liked it even more and decided to make a twist so it was a little different from one another, and then put the same amount of money into it and just kind of put it out there to see which one would win. And so one movie theater would get one of them, and the other movie theater would get the other. And unless you went to watch it on the other, you wouldn't get to see that one for free. So I would kind of miss out on a few here and there, but to be honest, we as movie theater people would trade passes to the other guys. It's a war between companies. The people who worked for the company didn't give a crap. I mean, it wasn't like we hated these people. It wasn't like sports, like where schools will get actively in the politics of trying to make sure their students absolutely despise everybody who goes to that other school because the 2 football teams are at odds with each other. It wasn't like that. I mean, if it was, the adults who were working there weren't buying it anymore. Like they had gone through that and we didn't care anymore. We're just like, yeah, whatever. We work here. We're pulling in a paycheck. We're nice to the customers because, that's who we are. We're not going to be rude to them, even if you tell us to. But we're not going to be like we hate those other guys just because they happen to work for a different company. Because guess what, guys? Next week I could work for that company. It was just you went where the job was. So it was interesting to work there. And I worked at a theater that was in the mall, so we'd have different shops that would come there and be like, hey, can we get some passes? Maybe we trade this with you guys and trade that with you. And to be honest, the passes were up to the discretion of the manager to use for whatever reason. And so we would have promotions where we'd be like, yeah, we'll trade the passes with you guys if you'll put up posters in your shop. And that was completely legit. That was something that even the company that when you told them, hey, this is what we're doing, they're like, yeah, give them the passes, right? Passes don't cost us a thing. A lot of the time you'd have those caveats where if the movie is brand new or if it's selling out, passes don't work. So it's not like you were giving up actual money. You were letting people come in there and sit down in a seat that wasn't going to be filled by anybody anyways. So in that regard, it didn't cost them anything. So we would make deals with them, and they would make deals with us, and everybody was kind of like this one big family that helped each other out, and it was kind of a cool environment to be in. And like I said, it was it was something I shared with my brother on that one. And I remember being in the mall. It was like a once a week, maybe sometimes twice a week. He'd go down to the what was the name of it? It was at a Dillard's or Books a Million. I think it was at Dillard's at the time or something like that. I don't know. Was it Dillard's? I can't remember. But it was a bookstore that had that we had in the mall, and he'd go down there once a week, maybe twice a week, and get a stack of books to read. In the office while he like I said, he was the manager, so it was like the opinion I always had of managers is they never did anything, and it was so true at a movie. They never did anything. We had a projectionist. He did everything upstairs, never really came down. We had a box office guy. He sold the tickets. You had a doorman, and you had concessionist. And unless there was a problem, like any kind of problem, chances are you never even saw the manager that day, and they just stayed in the office. And having a brother who was a manager, I would constantly go in there just to talk to him and chill out and just be in there with the other managers. And I would see they had nothing to do. Absolutely nothing to do like 90% of the day. The beginning of the day, they counted out the money. The end of the day, they counted out the money. And then they were done. Like, that was it, unless there was a problem. And most of the time when there was a problem, like a movie, the screen, not the screen, but the movie itself broke, the film kind of came apart and got tangled all over the floor, and they would have to go up there and fix it. The projectionist did that. He did all that. They would have to deal with the customers, but only when it got really bad. A lot of the time, a customer would complain. We'd, call them on the intercom. They'd have us go over there and explain what was going on, and they'd be like, okay, go out there and do this. So we still had to deal with it ourselves, which was like the worst part of the entire job. I hated dealing with customers who were already angry. You were not going to make them happy, and I don't blame them for being upset for a lot of the issues they had. People had so many different weird, unbelievably just asinine reasons for being upset. There's a baby crying in the movie theater. I understand. What do you want me to do about it, though? Like, what? I can't go over there and tell the baby to be quiet. He ain't gonna listen to me, right? Do I tell the mother to leave? Because she bought a ticket and she has every right to be there herself. Does her life stop because she has a baby? No, it doesn't. I understand. It's probably the polite thing to do if you have a baby and it's crying, is to probably get up and leave so everybody else can enjoy the movie in quietness. But that's not my choice to make. It's their choice, and we have no rules against a baby being in there and all that other stuff. So I can't do anything about it, And the best thing I could do at the time was to go in there and be like, we've had some complaints, talk to the mother and be like, we've had some complaints, or even the father, and be like, we've had some complaints about this. Here's a free, 4 or 5 passes. You guys are welcome to come back another time if you want. If not, there's the passes right there. Do whatever you feel like. I'm done, right? Like, I'm not getting involved in this at all any more than that. And, a lot of the time they would leave anyways. It would be like, they realize what's going on, and they'd feel bad about it. I also, if one of the parents, would leave the movie theater and go sit outside in the lobby while the movie's going on, I would literally go and get passes as soon as I could and go over there and give it to her and be like, here, thank you for not causing me an issue. I wouldn't say that to her. I'd be like, here, thank you, for doing what you're doing, and I do apologize that you weren't able to watch the movie. Maybe you can come back a couple more times and see another movie down the road whenever you can. Because, they don't get out a lot. If you have kids, I see it all the time with my brothers. Movie night or out, getting out is a treat. Getting a babysitter and stuff is not easy. So the fact that they're willing to kind of give that up when the child is not behaving as much as they kind of wish that they would be, is kind of a nice thing as well. But then you'd have some of the really stupid stuff where somebody was kicking the back of their seat and stuff like that. And to be honest, you would think that, oh yeah, it's kids kicking the back. No. 99% of the time, it's adults kicking the back of the seat of another adult. Don't ask me why. I'm a teenager here working at the movie theater, and here I am refereeing like grown adults in their 30s and 40s because they can't stop kicking the back of the seat in the person in front of them. And you just, what? Right? I mean, what am I doing? Like, this is ridiculous. You guys are kids. You guys are acting worse than I am, and I'm having to referee you guys. And sometimes it would get so bad that they would come out and complain so many times that they would literally send me into the movie theater to sit next to the people who were supposedly kicking the seats in front of them to watch their feet. And I would sit right next to them and just sit there and watch their feet. Ridiculous, man. Absolutely ridiculous. So asinine. But it happened, guys. You got some really crazy things, and it was anytime a customer complained, it was just going to be a bad day. could be a bad, bad day. And it's just one of the things you had to go through working at a movie theater, and kept it interesting, I guess, in the least. But I did see how ridiculous some people are about stuff. I don't understand why, but yeah, but the managers never came out to deal with it unless it was a big screen break and a movie break or whatever. And there was like dozens or even more than that. We had one night where the movie broke, and people didn't get up there. The projectionist didn't come in that day, so they were actually having to do the stuff themselves up there, which my brother was actually pretty good at, because we didn't get a projectionist until pretty late in the time we had been there, and so he had been doing that for years, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And the screen broke, and nobody came out to say anything, right? Usually as soon as the screen is out of focus, which basically means it's blurry or it's not on the screen right, so you can scroll the screen up or down so it fits on there just perfect. Sometimes it's split in half if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, and you'd always have somebody come out and tell you, hey, the screen's not whatever, and you'd have to go in there and look at it and be like, oh, okay, it's out of focus. Let me go in there and just turn the little knob and I'll get it in focus real quick. I didn't even have to talk to the managers about that. I could do that myself. Same thing for not being in frame. But occasionally it would break, and somebody would come out and be like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but it's black and there's no sound coming out of it, and whatever. Nobody came out that day, right? And it had done that for like 7, 8, 10 minutes now, and the whole time upstairs the film is literally spooling onto the floor. And film, for those of you who maybe never worked with it, is both robust and very delicate at the same time. It's hard to describe, but when it spools out onto the floor, it has a tendency, don't ask me how, it has a tendency to tangle up on itself in just the worst way possible. And it becomes so messed up that trying to sit there and unravel it, the more you try to unravel it, the more it kind of creases and folds in on itself and ruins it. So at some point you're just like, I have to cut this, unravel what I can unravel, cut the pieces that are ruined, slice it together. There's going to be frames missing, but most of the time, as long as it's not like a huge section missing, the audience won't even know, because there's so many frames already for every second that missing 10 or 15 frames here and there may cause like a little slight little like barely noticeable to the eye if you're really paying attention. But other than that, you wouldn't even notice it. But this broke, and like I said, 8, 9, 10 minutes had gone by before we got up there, and it had all spooled out on the floor, and it was just giant pile of nastiness. And they sat out there for about 20 minutes trying to unravel it before they just called it. They're like, this is going to take hours. And the faster we try to go through this, the more film we're ruining, and we're going to ruin so much of the film that the next showing and the next showing after that is going to have like complete and total like 30-40 seconds missing in the movie, and that's not possible. That's not what we don't want to do that. So they went down there and they're like, hey, we're sorry folks, we're gonna have to cancel the showing. Here's some free passes, here's some things for drinks. That's gonna be the thing. And that was just a nightmare. But I remember the managers being out there for that and taking the flack for it. All these people screaming and yelling, wanting more. Oh, these passes aren't gonna do blah blah blah. Oh, here's a couple more passes. Oh, thank you so much. Really you were that upset about it, but a couple more passes made you so happy. Then you knew it was like, oh, you guys are just acting. You guys don't care that you didn't get to see the end of the movie. You already got to see 3/4 of it. You didn't get to see the end, but you're going to get like 3 or 4 more passes. You're going to be able to come back and watch, 5 or 6 more movies down the road for free. And you guys, that's what you wanted in the first place. So it became very obvious, but it was an interesting time to sit there and work with my brother on it. And I just noticed that I've been sitting here talking for like 50 minutes now. So I guess we're going to go ahead and end the episode. This has been a kind of a special episode for me to talk about my brother a little bit, mostly to talk about the experiences we shared together. A lot of it actually was at the movie theater, now that I'm thinking about what we talked about here. But in general, like the games and stuff that we played, it really has meant a lot to me. And again, this Monday is going to be his birthday, so I wanted to do something kind of special for that. And because we shared this game and the love of this game together, and the reason I got in this game and playing computers was because of him, I felt this was the right platform to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys leave comments down below. Let me know some of the reasons you got into the game. Let me know if there's somebody that you loved or somebody that you still love that is the reason behind it. Go ahead and share that stuff. I love hearing the comments that you guys have left me. Like I said, I don't always get to reply back to them in person, but I always talk about them as much as I can in the videos. So I definitely appreciate you guys sharing that. And hopefully you enjoyed this one, as I said before, and I will definitely catch you all next time. Hey guys, and welcome to the disembodied voice of AC Gamer. We are definitely going to be doing a lot more series in the future, but here are a few of them that you guys might find interesting. Of course, you're more than welcome to check them out. I would love to hear your comments. Again, if you do enjoy these videos, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe. It's definitely the indicator that I use to tell if you guys want to see more videos like that, of that particular game style, of that series in the long run. So when you guys leave comments down, it helps me decide whether we should keep doing it, as well as whether you want to see games like that in the future. And here are a few of them right here. I kind of picked out a few of different genres. We will be doing spotlights for other YouTubers in the future. So if you want to get a little shout out, definitely let me know. If you group with me, chances are you will get a shout out in here eventually. But for now, these are just 4 series that I have that I feel like could use a little bit more attention and that you guys might actually enjoy as well. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we will definitely catch you all next time.